Donald Trump is set to enter the White House again. In his victory speech, he indicated one of the major policy decisions he will make will likely be about working to end wars around the world. Though he did not say where, Ukraine and Israel have been cited by geopolitical experts as the likely focus of Trump. Washington has driven NATO-wide support to Ukraine, with Kiev receiving billions of dollars in financial and military aid, enabling it to keep up the fight against a much more powerful Russia. That support has, however, been eroded in Europe and the United States over the past few months. Trump's repeated criticism of United States support for Ukraine and claims that he will end the fighting within 24 hours have only raised Ukraine's fears. Trump wants the United States to disentangle itself from foreign conflicts generally. Regarding the war in Gaza, Trump has positioned himself as a staunch supporter of Israel, but has urged the American ally to end its operation. He has also pledged to end the related violence in Lebanon, but gave no detail as to how. Joining us to discuss all of this is retired Major General Henry Ayoola, former commander, Special Task Force, Operation Safe Haven in Jos, Plateau State. Welcome to the morning show, General. Good to have you on the program.
Good morning, Dr. Ruben, Rufai, and Vimbai. Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. Good morning, viewers.
Well, the world has been contemplating what the international global order will look like now that Trump is already president-elect of the United States. On his second return, Trump 2.0. But I guess our major subject of conversation this morning is that how would the landscape of war look like? With a Trump who is interested first in American interests and who has been boasting that he will end wars in 24 hours, and Europe is panicking. Even in the UK, the security experts are saying, well, Trump coming back could mean a lot for security challenges in the United Kingdom. What do you think? What will happen to the landscape of war globally?
Okay, thank you very much. That obviously is a very critical question. For me, I'd like to look at it from various perspectives and dimensions. In the first place, I think this idea of high expectation of what Trump could do on the global stage, I think we need to establish it on a very firm foundation. I mean, as an engineer, we think in terms of probabilities. The probability of an event taking place is a function that it has happened at least once before. And so it becomes easier actually to analyze President Trump because we have seen him before. This is a second term. And this kind of ideas were muted then also as to what he could do. And in fairness to him, he tried. I mean, he made so much effort. You remember the deal of the century he was trying to make between the Israelis and the Arab nations. And he made some good effort. You know, but how well such effort will turn out, even this time around, is something that is yet to be determined. But let's look at it from various ways. Let's start with US and NATO. Some have argued that the reason why Putin perhaps had the confidence to go after Ukraine was because, the president of America was not a strong person or something. No, personally, I don't agree with that. First and foremost, Ukraine is not a member of NATO yet. There's no such president as NATO going to go to war or do anything for, somebody who is not a member in the first place. Article 5 of the NATO Charter is got to do with you being a member. You fight one, you fight all. So the idea that even if you have a strong American president, I don't see that in any way. And on the other hand, some will argue that, in fact, the attitude of Trump in that first tenure towards NATO, we all remember how he more or less harassed the European leaders, to pay their bills and, making the point that America is not going to be championing paying bills. People must be ready to shoulder their financial responsibility, which on one hand is good. But, it could be softer. And it kind of created a situation where the other members of NATO didn't feel very comfortable working with him. And that itself was a bad signal. Perhaps that even encouraged Putin, knowing that NATO was not as strong as it used to be in terms of cooperation and being able to speak with one voice and all of that. That's one argument about it. But one good thing about President Trump, which we must always give to him, is a very audacious person. And is somebody with great visions. And the way he articulates them and the force and the strategic direction and resolve to pursue anything, we need to give that to him and hope that he will bring that to bear this time. Not only with Russia and Ukraine, in the Middle East in particular. Maybe he can now resume the deal of the century he was trying to, enact. I mean, with the Arabs and Israelis. Okay. Yeah, maybe he's coming on board. We help the Arabs to become, and in fact the Israelis to become more, liable to persuasion and, looking at the two-state solution afresh and all of that. Okay. We look forward, and time will tell as we look at that.
Time will absolutely tell. I'd like to deep dive into some of these issues in a little bit greater detail. Of course, some of the details pertaining to proposals or potential proposals from Trump's team and incoming administration with regards to dealing with Ukraine are emerging. So one of those options that is being circulated, as reported by Wall Street Journal, is potentially suspending Ukraine's application to join NATO for 20 years. As part of that deal as well, is to create a demilitarized zone to allow Russia to continue to occupy 20% of Ukraine. And in all of this, Donald Trump says that American forces will not be used to patrol and to maintain peace, but rather he feels that European troops should be used for this. Now, especially when you look at the offer of telling Ukraine to withhold their application to NATO for 20 years. Do you think this is a feasible solution that's being put on the table? Do you think that this is a path to the end of the Russia-Ukraine war? This is just one of the propositions from Trump's team.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's back up a little and look at the choice of time that Putin brought up. I mean, that strategic choice of time. Don't forget, it was just shortly after COVID-19, of course, which every nation was just kind of trying to recover from the economic impacts of COVID-19. And of course, nobody would be interested in fighting a war at that time. Let's even assume that Ukraine was already a member of NATO. I'm sure they will want to exhaust the non-violent options as much as possible because, I mean, nations are more concerned about their economy today because that's something that can either cement their power or get them out of power. And of course, the citizens of every nation are concerned about their well-being economically. So if we look at that, that also may even explain why most of the nations are a kind of tardy about, allowing Ukraine to come on even now to join the NATO, the organization, because it will complicate issues somehow. Already, this war is on. So if Ukraine comes in now as a member of NATO, what happens? Does it mean NATO is going to join the war? Those are issues that are very delicate. And so you can understand why there's a deliberate delay tactics, as it were. I guess maybe if it comes up with a masterstroke of a strategy that can resolve that, and other members of NATO can agree with him to fast-track the membership of Ukraine, maybe that will work. But as it is right now, things are better the way it is. And I think it's better for them to do more of the economic sanctions on Russia. And of course, now, since there's been this idea that Trump and Putin have some special relationship. Maybe that can be trumped up and harnessed and taken advantage of. Maybe that will help Putin to come to a quick end state as to what went to get out of this war. Okay, those are my take about that.
General, there's no special relationship between Trump and Putin more than Trump loving a lot of dictators. And as Bob Woodward said in his book, War, Trump, while Americans were suffering, Trump sent COVID-19 aid to Putin. In fact, Putin was asking him, won't your people talk? He said, no, there's no point to worry about that. But the solution a lot of people are looking on the table, one iteration is the fact that Trump will say there's a ceasefire. The ceasefire means that Putin will take more land in Ukraine. He's taken that Donbass region already since 2015, which nobody challenged him for. He will take more plots of land in Ukraine and leave probably some areas around Kiev down, and nationalize this area and integrate them just like he did with Crimea, which a lot of people says is giving the bully the big hand. Also, let's talk about the East. You're having incursions, along the waters. What do you think Trump, around Scarborough Shoal and the likes, what do you think Trump will do about what is happening as regards China and Taiwan, for instance? What do you think he's going to do as regards, the situation in North Korea, which we now see North Korea being pulled into the war? Some North Korean troops have now been deployed into Ukraine for them to fight, which is also expanding the scope and all of that. So what do you see him doing to Rocket Man, like he calls it? Because Trump and Rocket Man, after the old shout of Rocket Man, they've been writing love letters to each other, which a lot of people say is just going to improve the power of those tyrants around the world. Is it not a bleak world we are going into as regards wars?
Yes, thank you very much. That's one aspect or one perspective of looking at it. Another way is to, people kind of see similarity between Trump, this triad of Russia, China, and North Korea. And you will remember that in the beginning of Trump's first term, he was very hard on China. Either his bullying tactics or it's a deliberate defensive tactics. We can't be too sure. But whatever it is, there seems to be a kind of special respect that Trump is able to engender from these other world leaders, because he's seen as a no-nonsense leader. And this is tactics of taking even normal things, which I call is the Trump rhetorics. I mean, when he say America first, our interest, these are normal things. But then when Trump takes the same point, the same facts, he has a way of highlighting and drumming them with extra punch to make it look as if he's going to do something extraordinary. And that may work for him. And I think it's worked for him, even in winning this election. It's worked for him. Because most of the things he highlighted during his campaign are things we know about the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, normal positions of these two parties. But then Trump has a way of hyping them to the point that people will think that he's doing something new or something strange. So for me, I think he may be able to get the North Korean leader, the Chinese leader, and the Russian leader to think or to back out of whatever nuisance value they are trying to deploy, easier than at least better than Biden. Biden is gentleman and all of that. So I think that may work for him in this area too. Of course, the fact that America, we always want to respond to any competition where China is involved, either it's economic or military. I mean, like we know, America has been more or less checkmating that emergence of, a near peer competitor that, China was becoming. And so that gets their attention. So let's wait and see what is going to bring forth as a strategy to keep check on these three powers. That's my take.
Okay, but General, earlier on I spoke about landscape of war. Maybe I was not specific enough. Let's talk about the balance of war using specific examples. For example, What do you think is likely to happen to Ukraine with a Trump presidency? Trump has already said he will end the war in 24 hours. What is that likely to mean? Does it mean Ukraine will be forced to negotiate with Russia? Again, balance of war in the Middle East, with Trump's talk about American interests, America first. What are we likely to see in that interplay between Israel, Hamas, and Iran?
Okay, so let me start with that of Ukraine. Obviously, we know that Americans' backing of Ukraine is very critical to their capacity to continue the war. Not only morally, of course, in terms of armament support, logistics support, and of course, I mean, the moral support, which is very critical also. Now, so, of course, Ukraine certainly will be in the position to reconsider their stance if America is pushing in a particular direction for a diplomatic solution. Like Rifai said earlier, some of the regions that Russia had taken already, although Crimea is already settled, the Donbass area is still, of course, is still, I mean, the war, the outcome of this war will be what will determine either there are going to be some amicable settlement, maybe some portion of that region will be ceded to Russia, and all of that. There's a whole basket of options in that, that whatever direction for a peaceful settlement, because I'm sure part of Russia's strategy in this is to elongate this war to wear out Ukraine to the point that they'll be willing to take any settlement that will be eventually arrived at. And I mean, usually any war will only end at the diplomatic table where some settlement will be agreed upon. So I see that as a possible way this thing is going to end. Because I remember when it started and I spoke on the first 1 month, I said it was difficult to discern the Russian end state for this war. For any war that is such, the end state is so difficult to even discern, it's virtually an endless war. And that's why it has protracted this long. But with Trump coming on board, it's certainly going to be a phase change point for both sides, because they are going to have to reconsider their stance, their current positions, and then the need to review and see what new position, what will be amicably agreeable on both sides, and to bring this war to an end. I think that is the way it's likely to go. Let's go to the Middle East, where we know how much that Trump did in his first term for Israel. And of course, Krishna his son-in-law is a Jewish guy, and we saw how many times he flew to and fro between Arab leaders and Israel and all of that. All those efforts, I'm sure he can resume that. And that already means that there'll be a kind of soft spot in his relationship with Israel that he can exploit right now. Knowing that, I mean, in his own case, it's overtly clear that he's on Israel's side. It's not. Sometimes the Democrats, you are not too clear that. You remember the other time that Netanyahu visited, during the Obama's time, visited the U.S. And it wasn't clear that he was very friendly with Obama, but he went and addressed the Congress and all of that. Now, that kind of daisy situation is not it under his own leadership. It's overtly. Of course, you remember in that first tenure or two, he moved the embassy of the U.S. to Jerusalem, which encouraged, of course, other nations to do likewise. So I think with that, and of course the Arabs know this too, and with the effort he has made in the past, which means it could be seen as a fair arbiter, better than any previous leader, in the sense that he had attempted this effort before, even if it's not altruistic, that he really meant that, but at least it's promising enough to believe him to take a second look at whatever offer is bringing to the table between the Jews, the Israelis, and the Arabs.
All right.
That's the way I see the balance in that region.
In that region. Okay, I'd like to bring the conversation closer to home because, of course, we know some of the dynamics that played out when it came to the eruption of the war in Sudan, with the Wagner forces, the Russian Wagner group versus, the U.S. proxy, as it's known to be. And, of course, we've now seen something quite similar happening in what I don't want to call a war. But of course, we're aware of the activities of the Russian Wagner group in the Sahel, specifically in those countries that have now chosen to leave ECOWAS. This morning we're waking up to news that the Defense Headquarters has confirmed that there's a new terrorist group coming into Nigeria and that they're infiltrating from Niger Republic, from Mali, that these confrontation, or rather the emergence or the introduction of this group into Nigeria is a direct result of a fallout between relations between Nigeria and Niger Republic. So given what we are seeing in the African space, specifically concerning Russian involvement through the Wagner group, what do you think the American position will be? Do you think we here in Nigeria and in the Sahel region and in Sudan will be able to see some sort of a breakthrough that we haven't seen in the past over a decade?
Okay, thank you very much. I like you bringing it closer home here. Yeah, of course, when we look at the fact that the Sahel, the G5, the Sahel countries, are predominantly Francophone countries. So the political influence of the French has been predominant in those areas. One thing that we must take cognizance about Trump, we may call it his rhetorics, American first, economic interest first, and all of that, but they will always play out because America is not going to get involved in any nation if there is no interest of theirs that is at stake. Okay, and looking at it, critically, what I see is I don't see America really wanting to dabble into those areas. Unless there are, of course, they have bases in some of these Francophone countries also. So that obviously is a strategic interest. But I think the more important interest would be the economic interest. That's what rules the world. That's the paradigm that rules the world now. Okay, and if, of course, they have some economic interest and they notice that the Russian influence there may not give them freedom of action in achieving their own economic interest, then of course they will find a way to get involved. Okay, and since the Wagner group is not, strictly speaking, a government agency, even though of course it has government backing, they are what we call merchants of war on their own. But then we saw the relationship between their leader, the late leader, and Putin and all of that. Yeah, they will find a way to go around that to ensure that their economic interest is not challenged and that their bases are not rendered unusable for them. I think that's their area of interest. But coming back home to us and the new what's the name now? Karurawa's new group that's just been found, Lakurawas. And their emergence from Mali and Niger. Yeah, let me explain that. When we remember that the multinational joint task force, which Nigeria heads, which actually started long ago in Bama, and it was President Buhari that came in the first tenure and kind of rejigged that body and moved the headquarters to N'Djamena. Now, Niger was one of our very active troop contributing countries out of the four major ones. And until when the the leadership there changed, when the coup happened, and you have what you have now, obviously the military cooperation between Nigeria and Niger was automatically affected. In fact, more so because our president is the chairman of ECOWAS, and we know his stance when those coups took place, and even the attempt to, the option of a military action and all of that. So obviously that has affected our military cooperation with Niger. And when these extra or non-state actors are created, more often than not, they are beyond the control of the countries concerned. It's just like us now. If Boko Haram strays into any of our neighboring countries, you cannot say it's because they have the backing of the Nigerian government. No, you cannot. But then, of course, if the governments were friendly, there will be a way of, some close cooperation that will help to checkmate such spillover effect of such groups. Okay, so the absence of that obviously must have facilitated their getting into our own territory, to Sokoto and Kebbi State. Okay. So, of course, the ball is now in our court to see how to add that to our list of internal security challenges and how to deal with that.
Okay, General, yes. I want to talk about a very most important war. I feel we've let our own fellow African brother, Sudan, down. Sudan has been at war for close to 2 years, and nobody talks about that war. Even the Americans, because they have no interest in it. Two proxies, Russia is in the mix. Also, some countries in the Middle East are supporting, both camps, the Dagamo camp and the other man's camp. And Sudan is in a hellhole. Nobody is talking about Sudan. Is that war going to end at some point?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, we know that Nigerian, I can't say too much about that, but at least we know that the Nigerian foreign policy has always been Afrocentric. And, so, agreeing with you, ordinarily we should have been concerned. But again, when you look at, when fire is burning, you have to quench the one in your house first before you start looking at the one outside your house. I guess that thing is happening at a time where most of the other big African nations are also terribly distracted by their internal crises and even the economic challenges that every part of the world is grappling with. And that may explain why we have not seen any Nigerian specific or overt effort. Maybe there are subterranean efforts going on. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs will perhaps know better about that. But we have not seen any overt, palpable, and consequential effort that we can say.
Let me put it in context as we go. Over 20,000 people have been killed in Sudan. The Gaza war we report every day, over 40,000 people. Over 20,000 people have been killed in Sudan, and everybody forgets Sudan and act like it's not even happening. But we need to go. Thank you so much, General.
Thank you very much. Thank you, General, for joining us on the Morning Show today.